Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Senator Romney. Thank you to the nominees and to your families for being willing to serve in the case of our two career public servants, not for the first. Senator Romney, thank you to the nominee.
And look forward to hearing from you. With that, I'd like to recognize the distinguished ranking member for his comments, Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Senator Romney. Thank you to the nominees and to your families for being willing to serve in the case of our two career public servants, not for the first time. And thank you, Mr. Ruckulter, for being willing to step up for your country. Let me just add on briefly to Senator Romney's remarks. Mr. Norland, if you're confirmed, you are going to confront a country that is essentially tipped into civil war 8 years after the February 17th revolution that deposed Gaddafi. Libya has yet to find peace or stability, much less attain its aspirations for democracy and prosperity. Most recently, the renegade commander of the so-called Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar, has tried and failed to take Tripoli by force, and at great cost, more than 650 killed and 3,500 wounded just since April 5th. And in the wake of President Trump's outreach to Haftar, there is more uncertainty now than ever as to where the United States stands as this chaotic civil war spirals out of control. Next door in Egypt, as Senator Romney mentioned, we are increasingly seeing authoritarianism and relentless repression in the Arab world's most populous nation. Through a widely discredited referendum this April, President Sisi succeeded in amending the Constitution to allow for an exception to term limits so that he can stay in office until at least 2030. He has crushed his political opposition, tightened repressive policies targeting the LGBT community, rounded up writers, journalists, artists, and activists for peaceful criticism. Yet President Trump has praised Sisi for doing an outstanding job, and Egypt remains the second largest recipient of U.S. aid in the world. With that much money at stake, and again, with this much confusion about where the United States stands with respect to this campaign of repression, we need strong leadership in our embassy. And lastly, United Arab Emirates is one of our most important partners in the region in terms of counterterrorism, political and military cooperation, and trade and investment. But that relationship is also amongst our most challenging. The UAE leadership has asserted an increasingly risky militaristic foreign policy. And many of us have a list of growing concerns with the UAE's conduct in Yemen, its aggressive isolation of Qatar, its role in Sudan, and inhumane and unfair detention practices and trials at home. It is not insignificant that this will be the first political appointee to represent us in the UAE, a post that has traditionally been reserved for career diplomats, I would argue for good reason, but I look forward to hearing from the nominee. Thank you for agreeing to accept these very challenging assignments, and I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. We'll now turn to our first nominee, Ambassador Norland. Again, we express appreciation to all of you for your willingness to take on these critical roles. Your full statements will be included in the record without objection. So if you could please keep your remarks to no more than 5 minutes.
Baghdad into joining their effort. Implication. Whom have a party.
I would presume
off of U.S. my opening remarks.
Relationship with
of ours and plays a Pompeo 16.
But it very quickly, the fact that
obviously be influenced
relation and
could encourage
level is including
significant dollar. I would
on this in April, President Trump job. Thank you very much.
And freedoms that we have as U.S. citizens.
Thank you, Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Norland, thank you for your commitment to the country and taking on this very difficult job. You're going to face a very fluid situation when you arrive in Libya. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, in April, President Trump called Khalifa Haftar as he was leading his failed offensive on Tripoli, and a public readout of the call made no reference to that offensive, and instead the president seemed to praise Haftar for his ongoing counterterrorism efforts, a message that deeply perplexed our international partners since he has been actively attacking groups we worked with to dislodge ISIS. Can you clarify for this committee the U.S. position on Khalifa Haftar?
Yeah, Senator, thank you. And as you can imagine, as part of my consultations, I've been exploring that theme, and it's clear to me that we consider the Libyan National Army to be a key player in any effort to produce a political solution to the situation in Libya. And it was, I think, as I understand it in that respect, that there was a conversation between the President and Haftar. I understand that discussion revolved around counterterrorism, oil market stability, and the role of the LNA precisely in a political solution. What I've found in the course of my consultations is unanimous consent across the U.S. government. There has to be a ceasefire. There has to be a movement towards a political settlement, that the United Nations' role in this process is key, and if confirmed, that's the path that I'll be embarked on.
I'm glad you're willing to take on this job. You, I think, can understand how a phone call in the middle of an offensive that doesn't mention the ceasefire or the offensive would be interpreted by the international community and our partners as an endorsement of that offensive, not a move towards a ceasefire. But that is not your phone call, that is the President's, and I appreciate your willingness to take up this job. Mr. Cohen, you talked about the importance of our security relationship with Egypt. Let me just ask you a general question. Do you believe that it's appropriate to use U.S. aid and the threat of cutoff of U.S. aid as a means to try to push a human rights agenda in Egypt? The situation is getting worse, not better. And I think a fundamental question is: Are we willing to deliver a message to Sisi that there is a line he can cross, at which point we are no longer comfortable or bound to be a partner with them if they continue to ratchet up this campaign against political dissidents?
Thank you, Senator. Let me take this in two parts. And the first is that I believe in, and if confirmed, I will, of course, be supporting the law, and the law that the Congress passes that provides the financing has human rights provisions in it. And consequently, we currently have a significant amount of money that has not been released because those conditions have not been either met or waived by the administration. So I think the path we've taken is completely appropriate. I also believe that the counterterrorism assistance that we provide is in our own national security interests. So we need to be sure as we go forward that we're protecting and defending American national security interests, which are served by ensuring that the Egyptians can prosecute counterterrorism against ISIS in Sinai, address terrorism in their western desert, address terrorism in Egypt's heartland. It's not just Egypt's interests that are at stake there, it's America's.
Let me just sneak in a couple of questions for Mr. Rakolta. You disclosed as part of your process before the committee having some business interests in the UAE that may require you under UAE law to keep some of those companies open. Can you just talk about the projects that you have participated in, your company has participated in UAE, and the steps that you've taken in coordination with this nomination?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. From 2003 to 2013, my company did significant amount of business in the UAE. We stopped bidding in 2011. We finished the final project in 2013. All of our staff and everything was removed from the UAE and sent elsewhere in the world. Secondly, there are contractual obligations and guarantee, both contractually and by law, that require us to give a corporate guarantee on those projects. If you will, the fact that if something were to go wrong, they could come back at us. That is the only thing, and we could have closed down our our LLC that was working there, but as a practice for tax purposes, we leave those open until the final guarantees are completed.
Have you had other business in the Middle East over that period of time?
We did work in Doha on one project, but the projects were primarily in the UAE and in Doha, and the Doha project was obviously back then conducted out of the Dubai office. But everything has been shut down, and we have absolutely no intentions of going back. In fact, I'll make it a little stronger. We will not be going back to doing business there.
In the region, in the Middle
region,
East?
yes.
And will you make that commitment once you leave this post as well?
Yes, I would, personally.
Thank you very much. Thank you.